You were taught to believe that your reaction is sincere, that emotion is authentic, that what you feel appears because that's just who you are. This is the first lie, not one told with intention, but one old enough to feel like truth. Your reaction is not personal, it is predictable, and more importantly, it is exploitable. Before you understand power, you must understand how little of you truly belongs to you. Most of your impulses are not decisions, they are reflexes, old circuits built for survival, not for control. Your brain did not evolve to see the game, it evolved to respond quickly. And in the modern world, speed of reaction is no longer an advantage, it is a vulnerability. Those who dominate do not react first, ever, they wait. Because they know that the first to react shows their hand. Emotion is an information leak. Anger, impatience, the urge to explain, to justify yourself, to be understood. All of these are signals. They say more than words. They reveal where you are weak. They reveal what weighs on you. They reveal what can move you without asking. You call this sincerity. They call it data. The instinct to react comes from an old need, safety. When something threatens you, a look, a silence, a rejection, your body goes on alert, muscles tense, thinking narrows. You want to fix the situation, you want to respond, you want to do something, anything. This urgency is exactly what others are waiting for. Power does not create emotion, power triggers it and then withdraws. It lets the emotion work on its own. You continue the process, you apply the pressure yourself. You say too much, you act too fast, you expose yourself. Real elites do not need to force. Forcing is for the impatient. They build contexts, ambiguous situations, uncomfortable silences, incomplete messages. Ambiguity is one of the oldest control techniques because the human mind hates gaps. When it doesn't know, it invents. When it invents, it betrays itself. Have you ever noticed how much uncertainty drains you? How much energy you lose trying to read a situation? Someone who delays a reply, someone who doesn't confirm, someone who says less than you expect. This is not negligence, it is positioning. In that space, you work. They do not. People believe dominance shows itself through direct control, through orders, through aggression. This is an infantile view. Real dominance is invisible. It shows itself when you adjust your behavior without being asked, when you change your tone, when you rephrase your message, when you recalibrate your expectations without realizing when it started. The first level of power is control of your reaction, not of your action. Reaction comes before action. If someone can control your reaction, they no longer need to control anything else. The rest follows automatically. That is why elites do not explain. Explanation is a form of dissent. Whoever explains asks for understanding. Whoever asks for understanding yields the frame. Observe how people without power feel a constant need to clarify, to justify, to be liked. They reveal themselves in every sentence. They negotiate from a position already lost. Power does not justify itself. Power is assumed. There is a reason silence unsettles you. Because in silence, you have no reference points. You don't know where you stand. You don't know if you are accepted or rejected. Your brain searches for confirmation. And whoever controls confirmation controls emotional tempo. They don't need to say no. It is enough to say nothing. Here lies the first real difference between the masses and the elites. Tolerance for psychological discomfort. Most people cannot sit in uncertainty. They hate it. They avoid it. They fill it with noise, with explanations, with reactions. Elites not only tolerate it, they use it because they know that whoever can endure longer without reacting gains the superior position. This is not a matter of intelligence. It is a matter of nerve, of internal control, of the capacity not to externalize tension. Think of all the moments when you felt the need to prove something, to show that you deserve, to show that you are not weak, to show that you know. Every one of these impulses placed you in an inferior position because whoever must prove is already suspect. Whoever must explain is already under evaluation. Real elites prove nothing. They let space speak for them. If they are not recognized immediately, they do not correct it. They do not rush. They wait. Because they know time works in favor of the one who does not agitate. There is a simple rule most people never see. Emotion accelerates the loss of power. The more intensely you feel, the easier you are to move. The more you consume yourself, the more someone else directs the course. You don't need to be angry to be controlled. It is enough to be emotionally invested. Attachment is a form of vulnerability. Desire for outcome is a form of dependence. Whoever depends, waits. Whoever waits, reacts. Whoever reacts, loses. True power begins the moment you no longer need things to happen a certain way. At that moment, you are no longer maneuverable. But until then, most people are captives of their own desires. They believe they want something. In reality, they are driven by the need to reduce internal discomfort. Elites use this constantly. They create emotional pressure and then do nothing. They let you burn. They let you expose yourself. They let you diminish yourself alone. This is an old technique. It requires no effort, only self-control. If you look closely, you will see that the most dangerous people are not the ones who talk a lot. They are the ones who speak little and observe everything. They are not in a hurry to be understood. They are comfortable with others not knowing what they think. Opacity is a form of protection. Emotional transparency is an invitation to exploitation. At this point, you likely feel a slight tension, a subtle discomfort, because you begin to recognize patterns, not in others, in yourself. Moments when you reacted too quickly, spoke too much, felt too intensely. This realization is not meant to free you. It is meant to place you, because before any technique, before any strategy, there is a simple truth. Whoever controls your emotional state controls your behavior. And whoever controls your behavior does not need formal authority. They already have power. This is only the first stratification of the game. It is not the deepest, but it is the one most never pass, because it requires giving up reaction, sitting, enduring, doing nothing, and for many that is impossible. Now that you have recognized how much you are manipulated by your own reactions, the next step is to observe how people create and control the frame. The frame is not visible. It is not a written rule. It is the air in which interactions unfold. It is what you feel without understanding why. Whoever controls the frame controls perception. Whoever controls perception controls decisions without forcing anything. This is the technique that only elites master. The frame is not about brute power. It is not about who raises their voice or who makes big gestures. It is about how the world feels when you are present. Whoever can remain calm in chaos, whoever can tolerate discomfort and use it as a tool, controls the frame. The rest are just pawns. Most people do not recognize the frame because they are too caught up in their own impulses. They see events as the way they are. They do not realize that the event is filtered through someone else's eyes, through a structure built by someone else, and that exact structure is the elite's ultimate weapon, perception. Observe how people react when someone dominates the frame. They do not think, they do not plan, they react, they adjust their tone, they adjust their body, they adjust their words. All of this without realizing that they are doing exactly what the one controlling the frame intended. This is invisible power. It is subtle, but completely inevitable. Those who master the frame do not explain, they do not argue, they do not ask for acceptance, they do not strive to be understood. Because the moment you ask to be understood, you surrender control. Whoever explains weakens their position. Whoever remains silent imposes direction. Whoever stays still becomes the reference point around which others adjust their behavior. A trained eye instantly sees who tries to dominate through words and who dominates through presence. Words are noise. Presence is the frame, and the frame cannot be contested, only accepted. Those who try to contest it become uneasy, exposed. They lose their balance without realizing why, and the one who knows this simply watches, unmoving, without being visible. This is the subtle rule. Real power makes no noise. It does not ask for attention. It simply exists. And those who try to challenge it are already lost, because they base their action on emotion. Emotion is vulnerability. Vulnerability can be read, it can be used, and precisely because it is inevitable, those who dominate the frame have a constant advantage. Observe how people seek status through visible moves. Who speaks first, who asks questions, who asserts their ideas. They believe this makes them powerful. It is the opposite. They expose themselves. They give clues about their need for validation. Those who remain still, who do nothing visible, are the ones who actually control the game. They do not rush to show power. Their power is silent, invisible. The frame controls the mental space of others. Whoever controls it does not need formal authority. They do not need to be a boss. They do not need to be known. It is enough to be present and let the world adjust to their presence. This is the difference between being perceived as powerful and being truly powerful. People look for external reference points. They seek confirmation. They seek validation. They seek the other's reaction. And exactly here lies the most effective technique: controlled absence. Not responding, not confirming, not explaining. This creates a space in which others consume themselves. They invent scenarios, they make mistakes, they expose their weaknesses without being provoked. This is the second layer: control through perception, not through force, not through direct manipulation. Through space, through silence, through opacity. What is visible to you is not reality. It is only the effect of the frame on your mind. And when you begin to see this, you feel the pressure increasing. There are no words to calm you. There are no promises. There is only observation. What is inevitable is that people react, not because they want to, but because they cannot do otherwise. Their minds cannot tolerate emptiness, uncertainty. This is the biological nature of emotion, to fill space. Whoever controls this space controls reaction. Observe how often people try to create chaos to assert their power. They speak a lot, make big gestures, trying to impose their point of view. It is a common mistake. Their chaos is predictable. They burn themselves out. They expose themselves. Whoever remains calm, whoever stays still, wins, not through force, not through aggression, through simple strategic presence. Now lift your gaze and see that this pattern repeats at all levels: relationships, business, politics. The domain does not matter. The rules are the same. Whoever rushes, loses. Whoever reacts, loses. Whoever stays still, wins. This is not theory. It is reality. Brutal, but inevitable. As you recognize these patterns, the pressure increases. Subtly, but constantly. because you see your own mistakes, you see where you reacted, you see where you were manipulable. You feel how every emotion made you easier to control, and all you can do is accept that you have always been predictable. This is the sensation elites exploit without raising their voice. There is a hidden rule few recognize. Whoever controls attention controls energy. Attention is not free, it is a resource. Whoever captures it directs the thought, emotion, and action of others. This is the third technique, capturing and directing attention without others realizing it, not through long speeches, not through obvious displays, but through simple management of the frame and of presence. Observe how people try to capture your attention with noise, with urgency, with emotion. They try to make you react. They try to weaken you. Whoever stays calm, whoever observes without reacting, does not just survive but takes control. This is the difference between being manipulated and manipulating without effort. While some burn themselves in their own emotions, elites increase their power. Not through visible actions, not through aggression, through patience, through strategic stillness, through anticipating reactions, through understanding the frame more than the content of the conversation. And the pressure continues to rise. You feel the tension. You feel the urge to react. You feel the desire for validation. You feel the instinct to explain. But exactly this awareness gives you the first real advantage, detachment. It is not calm, it is wait, it is observation. It is the realization that your impulses are predictable and that once you recognize them, you no longer have to follow them. This is the moment when elites begin to win without doing anything visible. Because you are already playing in their game, you are already burning yourself out, you are already losing control, and they simply remain still. Still, but dominant. At this point, the difference between those who understand the game and those who are consumed by it becomes clear. We are no longer talking about isolated reactions or temporary frames. We are talking about anticipation, about the ability to see a reaction before the other person knows they are going to have it. This is where true power asymmetry begins, because when someone anticipates your reactions, you are no longer an opponent, you are a mechanism. Most people live in the emotional present. What they feel now dictates what they do now. It is a simple cycle, effective for survival, but devastating in a game of influence. Elites do not operate in the present. They operate 2, 3, sometimes 10 moves ahead. Not because they are brilliant, but because they are not absorbed by emotion. They see reaction as an outcome, not as an impulse. When you understand how a person reacts under pressure, you can lead them without touching them. It is enough to create the right conditions. A delay, an ambiguity, a vague promise, a sudden withdrawal. It does not need to be consistent. In fact, it does not need to be coherent at all. Controlled incoherence is one of the most effective techniques because it destabilizes the other person's internal predictability. The human mind seeks stability. When it does not find it, it tries to reconstruct it. In that process, it attaches. It becomes dependent. This is an uncomfortable reality. Attachment does not arise from safety, but from instability. When someone becomes the source of chaos and occasionally of calm, the brain begins to prioritize them, not out of love, out of need. Real elites know this mechanism. They never offer total emotional consistency. Never. They give enough to create hope. They withdraw enough to create tension. This balance is not visible to those involved. It is felt. And what is felt but not understood becomes obsessive. People believe dependency is linked to personal weakness. This is false. Dependency is a neurological effect. When reward is unpredictable, dopamine increases. The mind begins to anticipate, to wait, to react. Whoever controls the rhythm of reward controls behavior, without orders, without constraint, without appearing dominant. This is the level at which power becomes almost invisible. There are no more conflicts, no more confrontations. There is only direction. Others move on their own in the desired direction. They believe they choose. They believe they feel. But their reactions are already integrated into the design. Observe how easily people become predictable when they are emotionally invested, when they care, when they hope, when they fear losing. In that moment, there is no longer any need to do anything. They lead themselves. Elites only adjust the intensity, a little more distance, a little more closeness, exactly as much as needed. This is a technique rarely discussed because it is uncomfortable, because it exposes how little human behavior is free, because it shows that willpower is fragile when emotion is activated, and because it dismantles the idea of autonomy that people desperately defend. In reality, autonomy is a luxury of those who are not attached. Whoever does not need cannot be manipulated, but most people need validation, direction, confirmation, the feeling of being seen. Elites do not offer these things for free. They fragment them, they condition them, they use them as tools. Have you ever felt that someone keeps you close, but never completely? That you never quite know where you stand? That you are always one step away from clarity but never reach it? This is not accidental confusion, it is deliberate positioning. Clarity gives autonomy. Ambiguity creates dependence. A clear person knows where they stand. A confused person searches, and while they search, they can be guided. Elites use this dynamic not to dominate directly, but to create a relationship of implicit superiority. They become the reference point, not because they are better, but because they are more emotionally stable, less reactive, harder to read. Opacity is intimidating because it offers no information, and the absence of information activates fear. Not fear of physical danger, fear of the unknown, of rejection, of loss of status, of loss of access. This fear is enough to modify behavior without anyone raising their voice. Here, psychological pressure reaches a new level because it is no longer external, it is internal. You become the source of your own tension. You analyze yourself, you correct yourself, you adapt yourself. The other does nothing. And this is precisely the ultimate proof of power, achieving results without visible action. Confused people are easy to lead, not because they are weak, but because they are busy, their mind is full, they think too much, reanalyze, anticipate, fear making mistakes. This cognitive overload reduces the capacity to resist, to say no, to stop. Elites create this effect deliberately, through calculated inconsistency, through incomplete messages, through reactions misaligned with expectations. Everything is subtle enough to be deniable. If it were obvious, it would generate resistance. If it is vague, it becomes effective. There is a critical point in this dynamic. The moment when the other begins to adapt more than they are adapted to. When they begin to anticipate your desires. When they begin to modify their behavior without being asked. When they begin to seek signals. At that moment, the power balance has completely inverted. And the inversion was not announced, it was not discussed, it was not negotiated, it was lived. This is one of the most uncomfortable realities. Power is not taken, it is yielded, unconsciously, through reaction, through attachment, through the desire to reduce discomfort. Elites only create the conditions, people do the rest. As you see this mechanism, a distance appears, not emotional, cognitive. You begin to see reactions as processes, attachments as effects, emotions as signals, not truths. This distance does not make you better. It makes you harder to influence. And this is exactly where the split appears between those who can operate at this level and those who cannot. Because once you see these structures, you can no longer react the same way. Emotion no longer has the same force. Desire is no longer an urgency. Fear is no longer an order. It is not freedom. It is disenchantment. The pressure does not disappear. It shifts. It no longer comes from the outside. It comes from the silence between reactions, from the space in which you no longer do anything automatically, from the weight of conscious choice. For most people, this space is unbearable. For elites, it is familiar territory. And in this territory, the game changes completely. At this point, if you have followed without rushing, you have begun to feel a shift. Not a spectacular one, a slow one, heavy. This is the moment when reaction no longer appears immediately, when a pause emerges, a space between stimulus and response. This space is the real territory of power. And here, one of the least understood techniques comes into play: withdrawal. Not obvious withdrawal, not escape, not complete absence, but calculated withdrawal. Withdrawal that is not explained, not justified, not negotiated. This form of withdrawal creates a vacuum, and the vacuum generates tension. Tension draws attention. Attention shifts the center of gravity of the relationship. Most people believe constant presence builds influence. This is false. Constant presence normalizes. What is always available loses its value. Elites know this instinctively. They are never fully accessible. Not emotionally, not mentally, not temporally. Access is fragmented, dosed, unpredictable. This lack of availability is not arrogance, it is strategy. Because access creates hierarchy. Whoever offers unlimited access positions themselves low. Whoever controls access positions themselves high, not because they are better, but because others begin to adapt to their rhythm. Strategic withdrawal works because it activates a deep reflex, fear of loss. People react far more intensely to the possibility of losing something than to the promise of gaining something. When your presence withdraws without explanation, the other person's mind begins to search for the cause. And in that search, self-evaluation appears. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something? What do I need to change? At that moment, power has shifted, without conflict, without words. Elites use withdrawal not as punishment, but as repositioning. They do not do it abruptly. They do not do it dramatically. They do it naturally, as if it were the most normal move in the world, because from their perspective, it is. This is a harsh lesson. Explanation weakens withdrawal. When you explain why you are withdrawing, you give the other person the comfort of understanding. Understanding reduces tension, and tension is the instrument. That is why elites do not explain absence, they let it exist. Observe how uncomfortable this is for most people, how strongly they feel the need to clarify, to say it's not personal, to reassure, to close the loop. All of these are reactions of inferiority because they attempt to reduce the other person's discomfort, not to protect their own position. True power does not rush to soothe, not because it is cruel, but because it understands the dynamic. Whoever is willing to endure discomfort longer dictates the tempo. And tempo is everything. Another essential element at this level is lack of need, not declared, not displayed, real. Need is the greatest weakness. It can be felt, it transmits, it influences every decision. Whoever needs negotiates, whoever does not need waits. Elites do not rush to obtain. They create conditions in which others come on their own. Because need makes people approach. Lack of need makes people pursue. This is a subtle but decisive inversion. Observe how people with high need are the most vocal, the most present, the most eager to be seen. They expose their intentions. They become transparent, easy to read, easy to anticipate, easy to control. Lack of need creates opacity, and opacity creates respect, even if no one can explain why. Elites do not ask, they allow, and what they allow becomes rare. Rarity amplifies value, not through marketing, through biology. The human brain gives more attention to things that are hard to access, not because they are better, but because they are limited. This is an old law, and it works whether people believe in it or not. At this point, status begins to build without exposure, without titles, without declarations, without demonstrations. Status becomes an effect of others' behavior towards you. If people adjust, if they wait, if they seek your reaction, status is already established. Elites do not pursue status. They create conditions in which status appears as a secondary result. And because it is not pursued, it is more stable, harder to contest, harder to attack. One essential detail: strategic withdrawal only works if it is not emotional. If you withdraw out of anger, resentment, or a desire to punish, the energy is felt. And then the dynamic reverses. The other person senses emotional control, and emotional control is weakness. Withdrawal must be neutral, with no visible tension, with no explanations, with no signals, just a change in rhythm. A reduction of presence, that's all. This is one of the hardest techniques to execute because it requires self-mastery. It requires resisting the impulse to explain, to correct, to reassure, to fix. It requires sitting with discomfort and not externalizing it. Most people fail here because they want to be liked, because they want to be understood, because they want to be safe. Elites accept uncertainty as a tool. They do not seek it, but they do not avoid it either. As this level settles in, relationships change, not through conflict, but through subtle adjustments. Someone begins to seek you more. Someone begins to wait. Someone begins to comply without being asked, not because you force them, but because the frame has shifted and you do nothing visible. This is the essence of real dominance: results without apparent effort, control without confrontation, influence without exposure. For those who do not see the mechanism, it seems mysterious. For those who understand it, it is inevitable. At this point, emotional reaction begins to feel not just useless, but dangerous. Because every reaction reveals, every explanation weakens, every rush yields ground, and silence begins to gain weight. Not a pleasant silence, a dense silence, hard to penetrate, in which decisions are not rushed, in which impulses are observed, not followed, in which control is not an objective but a natural effect. There is only one layer left. You inevitably reach a point where something changes permanently. It is not a revelation. It is not an emotional release. It is more like a slowing down, a subtle stopping of the impulse to react, as if something old within you, something reflexive, begins to lose its force, not because you suppress it, but because you see it. This is the final level. It is no longer about techniques applied to others. It is about what happens inside you when the game becomes visible. Because once you see the structure, you can no longer enter it unconsciously. Emotion does not disappear, but it no longer leads. True elites do not live in a constant state of calculation. This is a common misunderstanding. They do not analyze every move. They have internalized the game. Their reactions are no longer impulsive, but neither are they forced. They are slow, deliberate, sometimes absent, and this absence says more than any intervention. At this stage, power is no longer something you use. It becomes a baseline state, an internal position. You no longer feel the need to win every interaction. You no longer feel the need to correct others' perceptions. You no longer feel the need to be seen or recognized, because you understand something fundamental. Recognition is an inferior currency to self-control. Most people confuse influence with visibility. They believe that if you do not react, you lose. If you do not respond, you are weak. If you do not explain yourself, you are misunderstood. This is the logic of those who live externally. Elites operate from the inside, and their interior is stable. Inner stability is intimidating because it offers no points of attachment. You do not know what they think. You do not know what they feel. You do not know what comes next. And the human mind reacts poorly to unpredictability. It looks for signs, it looks for confirmations, it looks for reactions, and when it does not find them, it either calms itself forcibly or becomes needlessly agitated. This is the final position of power, to no longer be a source of emotional stimulus for others, neither positive nor negative, just a constant presence, hard to move, hard to read, hard to influence. It is no longer about controlling people. It is about no longer being controllable. And this difference is essential. Those who want to control are still tied to outcomes. Those who can no longer be controlled are free from reaction, not because they have given up, but because they have understood. At this point, you notice something interesting. People begin to behave differently around you. Not because you are doing something specific, but because you are no longer doing things you used to do. You no longer explain. You no longer rush. You no longer fill the gaps. You no longer repair the tension. And it is precisely these absences that create a different dynamic. Some move closer, others withdraw, some become insecure, others more respectful. You correct nothing, you adjust nothing, you let things settle. For the first time, you are no longer part of the turbulence. You are its edge. This is the silence no one talks about. It is not a comfortable silence. It is the silence of someone who sees too clearly to react impulsively. It is the silence of someone who knows that every reaction has a cost, that every word can weaken the frame, that every expressed emotion provides information. At this stage, other people's emotions become visible as processes. They no longer pull you into them. You observe them. You see frustration. You see urgency. You see the need for validation. You see the desire for control. And because you see them, you no longer need to confront them. They burn themselves out. This is where the circle closes. Because at the beginning, your reactions were exploited. Now, others' reactions are predictable, not to be used aggressively, but to be avoided, to stay out of unnecessary games, to preserve position. Supreme power is not winning every game. It is no longer playing the games that drain you. Elites understand this instinctively. That is why they seem cold. That is why they seem distant. That is why they seem hard to reach. Not because they do not feel, but because they do not react automatically. At this point, the desire to prove disappears. The need to be seen disappears. Emotional urgency disappears. Not because you have become indifferent, but because you have become selective. Selective with your energy, with your attention, with your reactions. And what remains is a state of internal weight, not oppressive, stable, as if nothing needs to be proven anymore. Nothing needs to be accelerated. Nothing needs to be forced. This is the position from which elites view the world, not with hope, not with enthusiasm, but with clarity, a clarity stripped of unnecessary emotion, a clarity that sees instincts for what they are, a clarity that does not rush to change anything. Emotional reaction, seen from this point, appears primitive, not wrong, primitive, like a reflex that no longer has utility. Anger feels like noise, fear feels exaggerated, desire feels like a loss of position, and there is no longer a need to convince yourself of anything. No need to adopt a philosophy, no need to make promises. This is not a spectacular transformation. It is a silence that settles in. A silence in which you no longer react to feel good. A silence in which you no longer react to feel safe. A silence in which reaction itself becomes optional. This is where everything stops. Not because you have arrived somewhere, but because there is nothing left to prove. Not to yourself, not to others. You simply observe, and that is enough.